Boys, you know what's kind of funny? I told myself a couple of days ago in the last part that I was going to start like double uploading. I had like mad motivation that day. And then today when I finally decided, hey, you know what? Let me actually make the final part for the Beerus video for Deku. I realized as I was watching the ending to remember like, okay, what was the flow of the story? What was I doing? What was I going for? I remembered the entire story that I had planned up in my head, but I also remembered the fact that I literally said I would double upload. And I realized, you didn't do that. You haven't uploaded. So I really just need to apologize to you guys. Sorry for the long intro, but I need to apologize to you guys. Right now, after I'm done with this video, I am going to script what if Naruto had the two tails, or what if Naruto was Scorpion's reincarnation. I actually was thinking about that one for a bit right now before like I started doing anything else. So I'm not gonna lie, I might straight up do like a Scorpion Naruto. That would be sick. Like, I can't believe I haven't done Mortal Kombat stuff other than, you know, Shao Kahn, obviously, because I did do that one. Oh no, I also did What If Deku Was Cabal. Dude, that video was fire. Anyways, I'm getting completely off track. Sorry about that. You guys know I love to ramble a lot, and I hit the mic. You know, I haven't talked to you guys in a while. Y'all know how I get down. Anyways, okay. So we left off last time with Izuku pretty much speaking to Bakugo and telling him that he met his predecessor. After this, we would have a couple of scenes going on throughout the day of UA High where as they're doing their homework, Bakugo would just kind of be like nudging Deku, being like, Deku, hey, what did you mean about predecessor? And Izuku would turn towards the direction of Bakugo and tell him that he'll tell him after school. But Bakugo, being the kind of person that he is, would be really insistent on it, and eventually would lead to Deku giving him small tidbits of information throughout the entire day of school, which lead to them eventually both walking home, making their way towards the train station. As they would be there, Bakugo would finally begin to have a full grasp on the situation, realizing that that's why Deku's so strong. His power doesn't derive from a quirk, it derived instead from a literal deity in their universe. So Bakugo kind of realized like, okay, I've been competing with the literal reincarnation of Kami this entire time. Like, what am I up to, you know? So because of that, he would finally realize like, okay, he's never gonna actually end up beating Deku. But this would lead Bakugo to have a bunch of questions and ultimately sigh, saying, you know what? I'm glad that this means that you're like this super powerful, omnipotent being, because it just shows me that even if I fail at my mission, we'll still have you around to take care of All for One. As, you know, Bakugo realized he probably shouldn't have said that, but he doesn't care. Izuku would be like, who's All for One? And from here, Bakugo goes on to explain the entire history, the plot, like the whole entire like backstory of All for One and how One for All came to being a quirk and all that stuff. So after Deku hears that, he'd be like, dude, your quirk is insane. Not only do you now have an explosion quirk, but now you have this super crazy powerful quirk that derived from like all these crazy challenges and people and handing it down. Deku tells Bakugo that he's so lucky, as Bakugo's like, I'm lucky, but you're the reincarnation of Kami himself. He would just go on to basically sigh and be like, whatever. Anyways, Deku, with me around and you around, this world won't be facing any problems. As Deku would, you know, think about it before telling Bakugo, but ultimately not say it. I mean, at the end of the day, that battle was Bakugo's battle, and, you know, he promised that he wasn't going to get involved with the All for One situation. He knows that Bakugo's going to be able to handle that. So Deku should be able to handle his own situation without bothering him or the rest of the planet. Just because he knows that there's a being out there who is so much stronger than Beerus himself was in his heyday, and he has to literally defeat somebody stronger than that who's out there in the universe, getting closer and closer as the years pass, destroying planets. Deku doesn't exactly want to put that kind of like thing on Bakugo, knowing that he won't even be able to do a thing if this like potential being even comes here, because at this moment, Bakugo wouldn't be capable of landing a single punch on him. Like, anything at all, like let alone an explosion from long range. There's nothing that could hit Deku or harm him in this universe of My Hero Academia, at least on this planet. But this would pretty much end up leading him to making his way home, as he would kick his legs up onto the air and think to himself about how he's exactly going to get strong enough to defeat this thing. Throwing a little tennis ball into the air, eventually catching it and just destroying it in his hands, as it would turn into nothing but dust before the dust itself literally vanishes into nothingness. And then Deku would just sit there as he would get up off his desk doing like a front flip, like like a back flip, as he floats mid-air and begins to think to himself like, how am I going to defeat this thing? And suddenly Beerus tells him he needs to train, what he's been telling him this entire time. As Deku's like, what the? Since when are you able to speak to me when I'm wide awake? And Beerus is like, well, our connection is becoming a lot stronger. Eventually, some of my memories are going to start to pass on to you. And at that very moment, Deku would proceed to fall onto his knees onto the ground as a bunch of memories start flowing through his head. He remembers Champa, he remembers Goku, Vegeta, Broly, Moro, Granola, Black Frieza, which was one of the most powerful threats they've ever faced, and this dude is even more powerful than that. In fact, it's a Saiyan, and it's one that was never accounted for. But that's regardless, I mean, that's besides the point. For right now, Izuku would be thinking about this, and he would have like a blurry image of who was the one that actually ended up being the one that put Beerus down. Upon realizing like that he can't exactly remember perfectly who it was, and that Beerus can't remember perfectly because he didn't get a full glimpse of it, because he straight up just died basically instantly, Izuku would just think to himself like he has to fight that, with Beerus explaining not to worry that he wasn't at his full power state. Beerus going on to say that he's willing to wager that if he was, that thing never would have been able to get a sucker punch on him and kill him. But he let his guard down, which is why he's not going to do the same. So as everybody else would return to school and the next couple of days would just be normal school studies, we would eventually be like shown to all of the students that what's going to happen next is the final exams. So we would have the test portion, which obviously none of you guys are here to listen to, followed by the physical portion where each of them have to face off against the teachers. Now, it would be in this specific area that Bakugo would actually go toe to toe with All Might, and the shocking thing would be that Bakugo would actually end up defeating All Might. Not like in a crazy way where All Might's like all crazy injured, but like he just showed that he was superior to All Might. He was faster than All Might. He wasn't stronger than All Might, but his combat style was well more than enough to handle somebody like All Might, a being as powerful as that. So what would pretty much end up taking place is that after everybody else would end up having their own battles against the teachers, Izuku would be the only one left. In fact, he's the only one without a teammate. This would lead to Principal Nezu telling Izuku that for his final exams, in order to make it even a bit challenging, he's going to be fighting every single teacher at UA. And he would also include a couple of other heroes like Gang Orca, like Endeavor, Mirko would show up, Best Genius would be there. Principal Nezu would be using like a robot and like telling all the people how to fight Izuku to have the best odds of slowing him down and defeating him. And Izuku would just be standing there looking at that being like, wow, guess I got my work cut out for me. As he would smirk, and the second that Principal Nezu would say to begin, Izuku would instantly blitz towards the direction of Midnight, slamming his elbow into her stomach, not hard enough to like do crazy damage, but just enough to knock her out and send her flying into Gang Orca, who catches her, putting her on the ground before then shooting a full like sonic attack towards the direction of Izuku, which he proceeds to just straight up walk through as flames would be shot at him from another direction courtesy of Endeavor, followed by a wind gust punch by All Might, who would also be present. This would lead to Izuku walking past both of those attacks as Mirko would come rushing in and throw a kick at the direction of Izuku, with Izuku catching it and him just slamming her onto the ground, knocking her completely unconscious. Following this up by flying towards the direction of Gang Orca, who was the first one to actually attack him, and shutting his mouth with one hand before then pretty much blasting a weak ki energy blast into his mouth, causing like a mini explosion to go in his body that won't like kill him, but it hurt him, knocking him out completely, and then turning his gaze right at the direction of Endeavor, as he would have like a little bit of an evil smile as he would fly towards his direction, grabbing Endeavor and All Might both by the hero like costumes that they have, and flying them into the air, spinning like a torpedo, leading them both to get out into the stratosphere where they both like pretty much ran out of oxygen, and then like flying them back down onto the ground, like slamming onto the ground superhero style, gripping them both by both arms. As he would then turn towards like the pro hero who can create a bunch of clones, and he would just shoot a bunch of energy blasts, like little like death beams at the direction of each and every single one of them, before then flying into the air and creating the biggest energy ball that was like created by Frieza, like, you know, when this like little ball turned into like a massive thing, and he then like aimed it towards them. It would be at that exact moment that Principal Nezu would say, and the test can conclude. Izuku Midoriya, we're very proud of how this all went down, as the blast would dissipate in Izuku's hand, and he would go on to explain that that was fun, with the pro heroes that were taken out by him, just like looking at him and being like, that's not okay. Like, in no universe should a kid be so strong that he can handle this many pro heroes. They would all literally be thanking their lucky stars for the fact that this kid is not a villain. Because if he was, like everybody else has kind of come to realize that has ever been in contact with Izuku and seen him fight, there's nobody that's going to be stopping him. And after that would pretty much take place, Izuku would make his way back towards the room where all the students were like watching him fight, and they're all just like dumbfounded. They're like, dude, what's the point of us becoming pro heroes if you can handle everything by yourself? You just took out like top 10 pro heroes all by yourself, and the symbol of peace like it was nothing. As Izuku would say, I've had a lot of training recently, rubbing the back of his head as his classmates would go on to tell him that he's like the best, he's the coolest, that he's gonna be the #1 hero for sure. Bro, a couple of them would even ask to be his sidekicks, not even full-fledged heroes, but just his sidekicks. Like, that mean the world to them. And Izuku would go on to explain that he's not sure if he's actually gonna be able to even become a full-fledged hero at this point. As, you know, letting that out, his classmates would be like, what are you talking about? And Deku would be like, oh, nothing, sorry, I didn't mean that. As, you know, some of them would like look at him and be like, so then what is he gonna be? And then Deku would say, no, I'm gonna be a hero, I didn't mean it like that, sorry, I misworded things. They all finally calmed down, because some of them were under the impression he meant he was gonna like turn into a villain or something, right? And so after this would finally be cleared up, all of them would just relax, as over the course of the next following days, we would be told about the forest training camp. The students end up going to the mall, where they end up originally being encountered by Shigaraki, but because in this timeline, Shigaraki's not nearly dumb enough to do something like that, this would lead... Wait, did Shigaraki get captured or no? Because I'm pretty sure Shigaraki got teleported away, and if that's not the case and I didn't have that happen, Shigaraki gets teleported away just to make everything a lot easier. But yeah, no. Continuing forward with the story, we would eventually have the training camp situation happen. Now, once they make their way to the training camp, meaning like they get off of the bus and they complete the monster section where they have to like just like completely go through a gigantic forest in order to make their way towards their rendezvous, because of that like stuff happening and Izuku noticing that every single one of his classmates is getting like great training in except for him, Izuku would just end up texting Nezu asking him if he can be pardoned from this so he can go train in space. And Nezu would just be like, well, I don't see why not, young man. As Izuku, after getting that text, would just tell Aizawa that he's gonna go out and train, and Aizawa would tell him what part of the world he's gonna go to now. As Izuku would say, he's actually gonna go out into the solar system, with Aizawa being like, okay kid, well, whatever. Because this is just shocking. He's like, it's like, bro, there's one thing to be as strong as All Might, and then there's another to say you're literally going out into space and you're gonna like float out there and be able to breathe out there. Like that's insane, you know. But that's literally what's gonna be happening with Izuku, right? So exactly that would happen. Izuku would literally go from world to world to world, flying out in space, like using his destruction energy to destroy a bunch of little meteorites, which were actually heading towards the direction of Earth. So not only did Deku like inadvertently save his planet from a bunch of little asteroids that could have potentially ended up hitting his planet, but Izuku was getting some great training in with all these rocks floating in the air, like flying through them, like evading each and every single one of them, eventually going to different planets and like just destroying them, like exploring, training, and like doing a bunch of really hardcore training until the planets themselves couldn't even hold up and they just blew up, right? This would lead to Izuku like getting a lot stronger than he was even before all of this. And as Izuku would be busy with all of this stuff going down, we would end up having the original situation where like the villains would attack the forest training camp. And because Bakugo's there, there's obviously nothing to worry in terms of like threat level. So a villain like what's the name of that really buff dude? How did I forget this? Like, I literally always talk about this dude. Muscular. Yes, Muscular. Like, when a villain like Muscular would end up appearing in the story and Bakugo has to face off against somebody like him, Bakugo's just so much more prepared than the version of Izuku that we get in the original fight. He would be more along the lines of the one that straight up like one-shotted Muscular with the smoke screen and the black whip in season 7. So Muscular just gets absolutely destroyed, and this would eventually lead to the villains pretty much not being able to capture anybody, right? This would lead to the villains like having to run away with their tails between their legs, and Bakugo just sitting there chilling, like showing that he was here, and if Izuku was not going to be present to stop them, he was. This would kind of send a signal to All For One, showing him that like this next generation is growing so much powerful, and if he wants to like defeat All Might or take One For All, which he thinks might give him a chance to defeat this new up and coming hero Izuku Midoriya, he has to strike now. Like, the time isn't later, but it's now. He has to figure out everything that he can about that young man, and using Aoyama, he would figure out where Izuku lives. This would lead to All For One pretty much taking Inko and Hisashi and pretty much holding them captives, instead of the pro hero students being the one held captives like in the original, meaning Bakugo. This time around we get Inko and Hisashi. However, fortunately for the heroes, we still had Momo and the Class 1B student plan a tracker on the Nomu. So this led to the heroes knowing what was going down, and Bakugo being taken alongside of them in order to go, take down the villain hero hideout. That would go perfectly successful, just like you would expect in the original, and finally we would have a showdown between All For One, Bakugo, and All Might. And this would be a legendary fight. Like, the only thing that I think I can compare it to would be the fight where Melissa Shield was in, like the David Shield fight, the guy who could like control metals and stuff like Magneto. Do you guys remember when All Might and Deku were like running side by side and they would like both punch through things? That would be so similar to the fight that we're gonna get against All For One, which would eventually end up with All Might punching All For One's mask, like destroying it, and Bakugo coming from behind All For One, like literally blitzing. Like, they were both coming at him from like the front, but Bakugo like did like an explosion thing where he shot himself to the left, propelled himself spinning mid-air behind him, redirected himself with another explosion, and elbowed him with an explosion charged up, sending an elbow crashing at his like spine, literally severing it, causing All For One not to be able to move, if not for the fact that he had a crazy regeneration quirk, which even then still left him extremely damaged by the end of everything. And All Might destroyed his breathing supply, so All For One was pretty much taken care of. And what's interesting is like Bakugo managed to do this with One For All way sooner than in the original. Like, All For One was defeated, and All Might wasn't even out of commission, meaning he still had another good 1 to 2 years of becoming a pro hero and staying at his tip-top shape. He didn't have to fight the Nomu, and now he didn't have to have that crazy battle against All For One. So he's able to be a pro hero for 1 hour a day, taking out like the small fry, showing that he's still around, all the while Bakugo's gonna be able to graduate and have a good time at school. This would lead to us jumping back into the point of view of Izuku, as Izuku, like I said, would just be destroying meteors and exploring the universe. This would eventually lead to a couple of days passing as Izuku would make his way towards the far end of the southern galaxy, where once he would end up arriving there, Izuku would see planets that just look so uninhabitable. Like, there's a difference between uninhabitable planets that are just uninhabitable and then a planet that looks like that was done to it, and Izuku can tell a clear difference. So flying into the stratosphere of each one, Izuku looking at them would feel bad before then just destroying the planets, like realizing that like if they're like this, they're devoid of life and there's no reason for them to stay. So using his finger, he would tap it just to ultimately destroy it, leading to the planets like having like a, like they're gonna be created again by the Supreme Kai, which are alive, but there is no Beerus. Does that make sense? Because he's dead and there is no god of destruction currently. So Izuku, what he would do is continue flying until eventually he would see a planet that has like an explosion going off in like a, you can see it from space basically, like an explosion just went off. So Izuku flies towards it very quickly, hoping to see what exactly is causing all this, and it would be at that moment that he would see a gigantic buff being with long hair that looks similar to Raditz with a monkey tail. Izuku, seeing this, would question what the heck that is, as this being would look at him with red eyes glowing, just staring at him, and it would just murmur, "Strong power level." as it flies in front of Izuku instantly, looking at him before then like just look like just pretty much like sizing him up, and then throwing a punch at Izuku's direction. Izuku catching it with one hand as the villain in front of him, you know, the way that he sees things, would just smirk. And Izuku would wonder why the heck that thing's smiling. He just showed it that he's so much superior to it. Before this thing would proceed to like uppercut Deku square in the jaw, sending him flying before flying up above him, grasping both of his hands together and slamming Deku into the face of the planet. This would lead Deku to come out groggily, as this thing would literally slam his foot onto the head of Izuku, like slamming him like he was a carrot back into the ground. At this moment, Deku would look up like super like out of it at this point, as it would like drag him up by his hair, literally like a carrot at this point, as it would hold him up and slap him around saying, "You're a disappointment." But Deku in this moment would flare his aura up to the max, which would cause the entire planet to rumble, and this thing would get so excited. He can see Beerus like behind him as like an aura or like a spirit, you know what I mean? As, you know, this being who now I'm gonna reveal is Cumber, which like, I'm not gonna lie, the reason that I'm using Cumber is because like, bro, he's so cool looking. Like, he's so cool looking. He has immortal youth. Like he has continual youth, so he never ages, which is why he was able to live this long, right? And this would lead to Izuku just like going full throttle at this thing, screaming before then throwing punches and kicks, but this thing would just like shrug them off. And if I needed to put this in a picture for you guys, have you guys seen the Broly movie? Just picture that, like he's punching at this dude and nothing's happening. He even blasts a full power Hakai beam, which would be like the size of half the planet at Cumber, who would just disperse it with one hand, before then grabbing both of his wrists, breaking them, and telling him to get stronger. As from here, he proceeds to kick Deku down into the ground like with his leg like a sledgehammer, as he would be completely unconscious, and the beings that were on that planet would proceed to nurse Deku back to health over the course of one day. As, you know, Cumber would fly away from that planet expecting a good fight next time, as Deku, you know, who would be completely unconscious, would be being told and scolded by Beerus, telling him why in the world he would fight that thing, being like, that was it, that was him, he needs to get stronger. Like, it just completely annihilated him, and there was not a thing that Deku was able to do. Not a ki blast, not a punch, not a fighting technique he could pull out. There was nothing. He was that much superior to him. And Izuku, like, realizing this, would just be like, the heck do I do? As Beerus would go on to explain that he needs to find Whis, pretty much telling him to fly towards this direction of the universe, as a banged up Izuku would fly towards the direction of Whis, and the second that he would arrive there, Whis, seeing Izuku, can sense his aura and realizes that that must be him. That's the reincarnation of Beerus, as Whis, you know, not having access to his angel powers, wasn't able to look at his staff and see how that was coming or none of that stuff. And the second that Izuku was there, you know, Whis was finally once more like able to like do stuff, as Izuku pretty much was forced to accepting the role of God of Destruction, which would lead to Shin being contacted by Whis via means of like a telepathy or something like, I don't know. He would finally be able to use his staff because this wasn't going to be breaking like a angel law or something like that, and this would essentially lead to like a supreme kind, not the one that we're used to like Shin. It would actually be a different one, like his son or something, like, or his son's son, which would pretty much lead to Izuku just standing there and being told that, you know, he is going to be the new God of Destruction before he can begin training him. And Izuku would ask why he has to do that, like he's not ready for that responsibility. But Whis would say that he's not able to tap into his angel powers unless he does this. So Izuku begrudgingly would end up becoming the Universe 7's God of Destruction, and this would lead to Whis proceeding to take him into a time chamber in his staff, the same one that Goku and Vegeta would train in, which would lead to Deku training in there over the course of the next 20 years. Whis would beat into him Ultra Instinct, perfected like God of Destruction mode, and when Deku finally comes out, he would have perfected a God of Destruction Ultra Instinct form, which would be beyond the likes of anything that has ever been seen before. His fighting style was literally perfect, and Deku was not taking any chances. Deku's not going out there in search of a good fight. He's going out there in search of destroying this thing that's a danger to the universe. So Deku goes out there once more and just searches for Cumber using Whis' staff, eventually finding him in the middle of the galaxy, which would lead to Izuku flying in front of him and asking him what he thinks about him now. At this point, Izuku would be a full-grown like adult, and he would look just like the one that we have in the thumbnail, because obviously, like, you know, if you're watching this in a part, then this doesn't apply. But if you're watching this when the full movie comes out and like I have my cool little God of Destruction fan art Deku, yeah, he's gonna be looking just like that. So after that would be revealed, Izuku would pretty much tell Cumber that he owes him something, as he would proceed to uppercut Cumber, with Cumber like not even be able to follow it in his base form, followed by slamming him into a planet close by and flying towards it, as he like pretty much like you know, like tackles, like, you know, when you rush at someone's body and you grab them and like slam them through something. Deku would slam him through 3 planets, then proceeding to like spin him by his shirt and slam his knee into him, which would lead to Cumber smiling as blood would be pouring out of his mouth and nose, as he would wipe all of that away and go into his full power state, which would actually cause Deku to smirk himself, thinking that he didn't think he would even be posing a challenge, but apparently he was wrong, saying good. As it would be in this moment that Deku would tap into his full powered state, and instantly holding one hand out, he would say, Hakai! As, bro, Cumber's dead. That's it. Just GG's. Like, it's raps, bro. He proceeded to handle it, and he stood on business like a real life God of Destruction. So after all that would be over, mind you, like, Deku didn't return after the 1 week of like forest training. He straight up was gone for like a month, right? And when he would return, Bakugo would be there, like All Might would be there and all this stuff, and Deku would be just a full-fledged adult. And they're all just like, Deku, like, how long were you gone? And Deku goes on to explain that he was gone for a while with his attendant Whis, as he goes on to pretty much fill them all in on the fact that he's kind of the God of Destruction of this universe now. And they're all gonna be like, what do you mean God of Destruction of this universe? Like, what are you talking about? You're a hero. And Deku's like, yeah, which is why this planet is gonna be the one that I'm gonna be, well, you know, like, in. I don't really feel like living in luxury. It's not really my thing to not be humble, so I'm just gonna be a pro hero while I'm here, and sometimes I won't be on duty because I'm gonna be out there defending the universe, destroying planets. You get the point. As Bakugo, seeing Deku in this like grown-up state, would be like, so you finally did it, huh? You're not a loser anymore. I'm proud of you, Deku. As from here, Izuku would go on to smile and say, oh right, about that. As Whis would tap him with the staff, re-aging him, like de-aging him, so he goes back to how old he was, and he would say, nah, I'm back, Bakugo. As he would let out a little like smile, and Bakugo would be like, well, I'm glad you're back, Deku.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video! Like it or die! That wasn't the line, Kachan! Whatever!